The drinking of the cocktails was as canonical a rite as the mixing. The company waited uneasily, hopefully agreeing in a strained manner that the weather had been rather warm and slightly cold, but still Babbitt said nothing about drinks. They became despondent. But when the late couple, the Swansons, had arrived, Babbitt hinted, "Well, folks, you think we could stand breaking the law a little?" They looked at Chum Frink, the recognized lord of language. Frink pulled at his eyeglass cord as if a bell rope. He cleared his throat and said that which was the custom. "I'll tell you, George, I'm a law-abiding man, but they do say Verg Gunch is a regular yegg, and of course he's bigger'n I am, and I just can't figure out what I'd do if he tried to force me into anything criminal." Gunch was roaring, "Well, I'll take a chance," when Frink held up his hand and went on, "So if Verg and you insist, Georgie, I'll park my car on the wrong side of the street, because I take it for granted that's the crime you're hinting at." There was a great deal of laughter. Mrs. Jones asserted, "Mr. Frink is simply too killing. You'd think he was so innocent." Babbitt clamored, "How did you guess it, Chum? Well, you all just wait a moment while I go out and get the keys to your cars." Through a froth of merriment he brought the shining promise, the mighty tray of glasses with the cloudy yellow cocktails in the glass pitcher in the center. The men babbled, "Oh, gosh, have a look," and "This gets me right where I live," and "Let me at it." But Chum Frink, a traveled man and not unused to woes, was stricken by the thought that the potion might be merely fruit juice, with a little natural spirits. He looked timid as Babbitt, a moist and ecstatic almoner, held out a glass. But as he tasted it, he plied, "Oh, man, let me dream on. It ain't true, but don't waken me. Just let me slumber." 2 hours before, Frink had completed a newspaper lyric beginning, "I sat alone and groused and thunk, and scratched my head and sighed and wunk, and groaned. There are still black who like the old-time gin-mill back, that den that makes a sage a loon, the vile and smelly old saloon. I'll never miss her poison booze, whilst the bubbling spring I can use, that leaves my head at merry morn as clear as any babe new-born." Babbitt drank with the others. His moment's depression was gone. He perceived that these were the best fellows in the world. He wanted to give them 1,000 cocktails. "Think you could stand another?" he cried. The wives refused with giggles, but the men, speaking in a wide, elaborate, enjoyable manner, gloated, "Well, sooner than have you get sore at me, Georgie." "You got a little dividend coming," said Babbitt to each of them, and each intoned, "Squeeze it, Georgie, squeeze it." When beyond hope the pitcher was empty, they stood and talked about prohibition. The men leaned back on their heels, put their hands in their trousers pockets, and proclaimed their views with the booming profundity of a prosperous male repeating a thoroughly hackneyed statement about a matter of which he knows nothing whatever. "Now, I'll tell you," said Vergil Gunch. "Way I figure it is this, and I can speak by the book because I've talked to a lot of doctors and fellows that ought to know, and the way I see it is that it's a good thing to get rid of the saloon, but they ought to let a fellow have beer and light wines." Howard Littlefield observed, "What isn't generally recognized is that it's a dangerous proposition to invade the rights of personal liberty. Now, take this for instance. The King of Bavaria, I think it was Bavaria? Yes, Bavaria it was, in 1862, March 1862, he issued a proclamation against public grazing of livestock. The peasantry had stood for overtaxation without the slightest complaint, but when this proclamation came out they rebelled. Or it may have been Saxony, but it just goes to show the dangers of invading the rights of personal liberty." "That's it. No one got a right to invade personal liberty," said Orville Jones. "Just the same, you don't want to forget prohibition is a mighty good thing for the working class. Keeps 'em from wasting their money and lowering their productiveness," said Vergil Gunch. "Yes, that's so, but the trouble is the manner of enforcement," insisted Howard Littlefield. "Congress didn't understand the right system. Now, if I'd been running the thing, I'd have arranged it so the drinker himself was licensed, and then we could have taken care of the shiftless workman, keep him from drinking, and yet not have interfered with the rights, with the personal liberty of fellows like ourselves." They bobbed their heads, looked admiringly at one another, and stated, "That's so. That wouldn't be a stunt." "Thing that worries me is a lot of these guys will take to cocaine," sighed Eddie Swanson. They bobbed more violently and groaned, "That's so. There is danger of that." Chum Frink chanted, "Oh, say, I got hold of a swell new recipe for homemade beer the other day. You take—" Gunch interrupted, "Wait, let me tell you mine." Littlefield snorted, "Beer rats! Things to do to ferment cider." Jones insisted, "I've got the recipe that does the business," Swanson begged. "Oh, say, let me tell you the story." But Frink went on resolutely, "You take and save the shells from peas, and pour 6 gallons of water on a bushel of shells, and boil the mixture till—" Mrs. Babbitt turned them with yearning sweetness. Frank hastened to finish even his best beer recipe, and she said gaily, "Dinner is served." There was a good deal of friendly argument among the men as to which should go in last, and while they were crossing the hall from the living room to the dining room, Vergil Gunch made them laugh by thundering, "If I can't sit next to Myra Babbitt and hold her hand at the table, I won't play. I'm going home." In the dining room they stood embarrassed, while Mrs. Babbitt fluttered, "Now let me see. Oh, I was going to have some nice hand-painted place cards for you, but let me see. Mr. Frink, would you sit here?" The dinner was in the best style of women's magazine art, whereby the salad was served in hollowed apples, and everything but the invincible fried chicken resembled something else. Ordinarily the men found it hard to talk to the women. Flirtation was an art unknown on Floral Heights, and the realms of offices and of kitchens had no alliances. But under the inspiration of cocktails, conversation was violent. Each of the men still had a number of important things to say about prohibition, and now that each had a loyal listener in his dinner partner, he burst out, "I found a place where I can get all the hooch I want at 8 a quart. Did you read about this fellow that went and paid $1,000 for 10 cases of red-eye that proved to be nothing but water? Seems the fellow was standing on the corner, and the fellow comes up to him. They say there's a whole raft of stuff being smuggled across at Detroit. What I always say is, what a lot of folks don't realize about prohibition, and then when you get all this awful poison stuff, wood alcohol and everything. Of course I believe in it on principle, but I don't propose to have anybody tell me what I got to think and do. No American will ever stand for that." But they all felt that it was rather in bad taste for Orville Jones, and he not recognized as one of the wits of the occasion anyway, to say, "In fact, the whole thing about prohibition is this: it isn't the initial cost, it's the humidity." Not till the one required topic had been dealt with did the conversation become general. It was often, and admittedly, said of Vergil Gunch, "Gee, that fellow can get away with murder. Why, he can pull a raw one in mixed company, and all the ladies'll laugh their heads off. But me, gosh, if I crack anything that's just the least bit off color, I get razzed for fair." Now Gunch delighted them by crying to Mrs. Eddie Swanson, youngest of the women, "Louetta, I managed to pinch Eddie Dorky out of his pocket, and what say you we sneak across the street when the folks aren't looking? Got something," with a gorgeous leer, "awful important to tell you." The women wriggled, and Babbitt was stirred to like naughtiness. "Say, folks, I wish I'd dared to show you a book I borrowed from Doc Pattern." "Now, George, the idea!" Mrs. Babbitt warned him. "This book, racy isn't the word. It's some kind of anthropological report about customs in the South Seas. And what it doesn't say, it's a book you can't buy. Verge, I'll lend it to you." "Me first," insisted Eddie Swanson. "Sounds spicy." Orville Jones announced, "Say, I heard a good one the other day about a couple of Swedes and their wives." And in the best Jewish accent he resolutely carried the good one to a slightly disinfected ending. Gunch capped it. But the cocktails waned, the seekers dropped back into cautious reality. Chum Frink had recently been on a lecture tour among the small towns, and he chuckled.